Rosemarie Castoro was one of the central figures of the 1960s minimal and concept art scene in New York. She lived since 1964 in a skylight loft studio in Soho, in Manhattan, which was one of the classic neighborhoods of the time where a lot of artists had these loft studios. Also in the 60s, she shared this space with her then partner Carl Andre. This place was very special. It was a social hub for the scene back then, and there were many artists going in and out through this space that we know now as the heroes of this avant-garde scene of the time. Rosemarie Castoro started studying at the Pratt Institute in New York in the early 60s. She experimented with different media, from printmaking to painting, but also she engaged with choreography and modern dance. So these paintings look also like dance instructions or notations almost. They definitely engage very much with movement in space and dynamics of movement. Although there are two-dimensional minimal paintings, there are like patterns cut out of a potential infinity of form. Frank Stella said that she was one of the best colorists of their scene. The later group of paintings engages more on a conceptual level with form. And they are diagrammatic, and they deal also with the very intense surface structures. By 1969, Rosemarie Castoro stopped painting, and she starts to engage with a lot of different experimental new art forms that were around at the time in New York in the avant-garde.
Storage, forage, change clothes, mask face, plant jacket, leg pump.
And these forms included conceptual text pieces, concrete poetry, street works, going out into the streets with interventions. She kept all these experiences in a very strict conceptual form, and the rigor of arithmetic. She used a stopwatch to tell time the different activities of a day. And then she called these text pieces, for example, vacation time or love's time. So we always have these double entendre and these double meanings and these allegorical meanings that enter these seemingly very formalistic, very strict works. Also, she starts to abandon color, which I think we can see in the context of a lot of political unrest in America at the time. But she was also reacting towards maybe having been put too much into a niche, into a category of the great colorists, which she also found maybe a too narrow definition that could be a gendered definition. And she said that these were paintings coming off the wall. This was the next step from the conceptual painting projects into sculpture. She had a self-timer Polaroid camera set up in her studio, and she would constantly engage performatively with these works in her space. And then these photographs she would paste into her journals, which were quite conceptual writing, and then juxtaposed to this ongoing studio practice. In this exhibition, we have two very important works from this period. One is a giant brushstroke wall sculpture, the largest one she ever created, and it's called Armpit Hair. It's growing literally out of the wall. So it looks as if it was made for the space, almost impromptu. It has a lightness of the gesture of this form, which is organic and abstract at the same time. And also they really start to indicate the period of what we call today post-minimalism, which means we still have an abstract form, but there is some other investment in the work. There are sexual illusions, the body comes into the picture, or playfulness. And also Beaver Strap is a wonderful piece. The title refers to the English translation of her Italian family name, Castoro. But also in American slang, the word beaver was also connected to the female private parts. And she was also performing in her studio inside of this installation, hiding as if she was trapped herself. In 1979, Castoro embarks on a completely new and very complex sculptural experimentation. These were the flashes. The flashes started with a private story where her mother sent her in a Coca-Cola bottle some $20 bills. She took them out and started to set them up on a windowsill upright and started to crumble and fold them in her hands. And so these upright, crumbled forms started to happen. And she found them very inspiring. And then they became very large-scale steel sculptures. The term flasher came from this idea of a dirty old man in a park who opens his coat to young girls, and that her mother had told her to be careful about. And she exhibited those structures in public spaces in New York, for example, on 3rd Avenue in Midtown, where she had a group of these flashers in 1984. Rosemarie Castoro is one of the very important pioneering female artists of the post-war avant-garde, whose work had been overlooked so far and been written out of the minimalism canon, and was reintroduced in the last 5 years in the United States and recently in Europe.